From this point, Ashitaka is slowly turning into a Tatari god. Just like the monster that has attacked the village a little while ago, his pain and suffering gradually becomes unbearable and he begins to curse his fate. The wild boar god who attacks the village also must have controlled the curse with his reason at first, but gradually becomes the Tatari god. In the same manner, Ashitaka is destined to be the next Tatari god. Later, in a battle, he shoots his arrow normally, but he shows a monstrous power, and the arrow tears off the opponent's samurai both arms. When he shoots the next arrow, it easily chops off the opponent's head, which surprises Ashitaka himself. This is because at this point he's given a sacred power which is also cursed. The power of the curse invites Ashitaka to a suffering that leads to death, while the sacred power increases his strength infinitely. Also in Irontown, he carries wounded son and says, "Out of my way, I'm going." Then he pushes a huge wooden gate open with one hand, which usually requires dozens of people to open. Again, he does it with his cursed right hand. This means when Ashitaka feels anger or sadness or something illogical, he gains infinite power. We only see scenes where Ashitaka manages to control and uses his infinite power at will and think that's all there is. But they definitely portray the process of Ashitaka gradually becoming a monster. In fact, the conflict of whether Ashitaka can survive as a human or become a Tatari god is another substructure that's hidden in the story. However, it is not very noticeable. After all, I think why people can't notice it is because the movie was titled Princess Mononoke, which made the piece look like a romance movie. But it's not a romance. It's a story about Ashitaka. It's really the legend of Ashitaka. Ashitaka has despair and anger in his mind, but on the surface, he shows no emotion and acts gently. And Miyazaki said that in this movie he decided not to portray Ashitaka's inner despair and anger. The reason for that is because while he was making the movie, he talked to Ryotaro Shiba, a novelist, and was deeply impressed by what Shiba said, and thought, "I get it! People who complain so easily are wimps! Now I see why I hate Hideaki Anno's Evangelion. The tiny little wimp keeps on whining, 'I'm unfortunate, I'm unfortunate.'" Shiba told him, "People who are truly unfortunate do not whine, but they rather become well-mannered." Miyazaki was so impressed, and that became the inspiration. That's why Ashitaka's inner voices are not spoken through lines, unlike Dora in Castle in the Sky, who speaks to herself. This might be more convenient. As a result, the depiction of Ashitaka progressively becoming a monster is shown through pictures, but we somehow see that as a superhero using superpower. But that's not how it should be seen. There's a scene where Ashitaka bends the opponent's sword with just one finger, and at the end breaks it with his thumb and index finger. But that expression clearly shows how his anger goes out of control and becomes monstrous. At first, Ashitaka also calms down and controls his mind. Even when he's told rudely to leave the village, he just sighs and says, "Okay." But in the latter half of the movie, his power goes out of his control more and more when he becomes emotional. And the wise woman is the only person in the village who notices it. It is not the dead Tatari god that she is afraid of. It is Ashitaka who would one day lose human nature and turns into a Tatari god that she's most afraid of. That's why she thinks Ashitaka is a good boy and would have taken over our village and become a good king. But now he will become a monster because of the pain and resentment and the anger towards the absurdity that has descended upon him. Let's kick him out of the village before that happens. On top of that, the wise woman plans to send this young man who will become a Tatari god to the king of Yamato in the west, who imposed a curse on our village. Jomon people thought that curses were something that must be given back to someone. They called it imigaeshi, a type of retaliation. It was a rule between uncivilized tribes that if they received hatred from others, they would curse them back. This rule became more systematized dramatized during Heian era and was called Shikigami Gaishi or Returning of Fierce God. So the wise woman, with her perfect poker face, operates a retaliation against the country of Yamato in the west by sending Ashitaka as a strategic weapon. But neither Ashitaka nor the villagers are aware of this at all. So Ashitaka believes, if I go west, I may be able to remove the curse, and thinks, I have to prevent the village from further infection of the curse. Therefore, he doesn't realize that he is now the curse itself. Ashitaka doesn't know at this point that after a few weeks or months, he too becomes a Tatari god, has strange snake-like stuff clinging on his body, and attacks the country in the west. In this movie, there's one more person who may be noticing what the wise woman notices. That's Jigo, who appears a little later in the story, a complex old man who seems to have many secrets. When Ashitaka first meets Jiko, Ashitaka tells him, "This iron bullet was inside a wild boar. Because of that, I received the curse." Jiko stares at Ashitaka for a while and suddenly says, "From here, go to the west end and go even farther west. Then, there's a great god in the mountains. If you meet that god, your curse may disappear." This must mean that Jiko also thinks of attacking and defeating the Nightwalker, a big monster with Ashitaka, who is now also a big monster. So you can see the true intentions in Princess Mononoke are hard to read, because the movie does not clarify the thoughts or strategies of each individual, but is designed in a way that makes the viewer see the story only from Ashitaka's point of view. Now, we're on to what all of you have been waiting for, how Princess Mononoke is very naughty. After Ashitaka's exile is decided, Kaya, a girl who admires and loves him, stops him at the exit of the village. Here, Kaya confesses her love and says, "I'll be longing you forever," and gives Ashitaka a small dagger made of obsidian. When Ashitaka receives it, he gives this super handsome smile and says, "Me too, I will always think about you." This line by Ashitaka actually means, "I will not fall in love with anyone else in the future for the rest of my life." And Ashitaka, who receives the crystal dagger, says in such a good-looking smile. That's why quite a lot of female audience don't like this scene, or they say, "That's what I hate about Ashitaka." It's because a girl gives him a confession of a lifetime, which he responds to with a handsome smile, also receives a dagger made of precious obsidian from her, and without any hesitation, he later gives it to another girl, Sam, who has the exact same voice as Kaya, which is no surprise because they are both voiced by the same actress, Yuriko Ishida. Not only that, he gives it through a dog. Instead of giving it to her directly, he's like, "Give this to San, please," and the dog is like, "Yes, sir." And then when the dog gives it to San, she's like, "Oh, beautiful," and she makes this romantic facial expression. And those lady audience watch this scene and be like, "What is wrong with this anime?" Sure, it's natural for them to get mad. And at the end of the movie, they say to each other, "Hey, I'll come and see you again sometime." "Oh yeah, come. And we're like, "The curse is removed, so stop flirting, go home and meet Kaya." And this anguished voice that says, "Hurry up and come back to the village," is even written on Ghibli's official guidebook. In this book titled Ghibli's textbook, Princess Mononoke, which is an official book by Ghibli, a female writer wrote, "This is what I find unacceptable about Ashitaka." I get the anger, but in fact, the scene with Kaya at the exit of village is not what you think it is.